Being a magical girl during World War II was a unique experience. Next door, a certain loli named Tan has something to say about this period. Princess Fine was the heir to a small country during this fictional World War II era. Her kingdom faced invasion by the Germanic Empire. To seek support, Fine traveled by train to the British Empire, but Germanic Empire soldiers relentlessly pursued her, even searching for her on a train in a neutral country. Fine and her 2 bodyguards climbed to the train's roof to evade the Germanic soldiers. Meanwhile, the soldiers discovered a major in charge of a special transport on the train. Initially, Fine's goal was simple: reach the British Empire before negotiations. However, the Germanic soldiers caught up on the roof. Fine slipped while dodging bullets, but managed to grab a train pole, narrowly avoiding falling. With her life hanging by a thread, Fine remained calm, checked her surroundings, and kicked open a window to jump back inside with her bodyguards. They found a refrigerated sealed chamber inside, which seemed to hide a big secret. Fine was about to open the refrigerated box when the major in charge appeared. Seeing her bodyguards injured, Fine took the chance to open the train door as it entered a tunnel. As the train emerged from the tunnel onto a bridge, she immediately jumped into the river with her bodyguards. 2 Empire soldiers were curious about the contents of the refrigerated box, but the major declared it a top secret ordered by the Emperor and executed them. This, of course, was fictional history. Fine and another bodyguard rescued an injured man, but he was beyond help. He hoped the princess would protect their country. Fine promised that as long as she lived, she would never forget this mission. On September 1st, 1939, the Germanic Empire suddenly invaded the neighboring country of Laponia. Upon hearing this, the British Empire declared war on the Germanic Empire. Despite the Germanic Empire having air and ground forces coordinated in blitzkrieg tactics, surrounding empires were quickly overwhelmed. Soon, the Germanic Empire's claws reached out to the Duchy of Elstaaten, a place resembling a fusion of Austria and Switzerland in our actual history. What an explosive historical backdrop! Fine fled to a town and temporarily rested at an inn run by immigrants' descendants. She reminded herself to endure until the dust settled, relying on her people's trust to have reached this far and vowing not to let them down. This place was also known as the homeland of the pure white witch. Fine changed her clothes silently while looking at a portrait. Meanwhile, Major Berkman and his subordinate Rickard were transporting a refrigerated box containing a red-haired girl, heading to the air transport site. Concerned about the box being opened earlier, Berkman feared an accident. There were rumors that the red-haired girl could destroy a squadron by herself, which the Emperor of the Germanic Empire strongly believed. If the rumor were true, what an interesting witch she would be. Meanwhile, Fine, now dressed in formal attire, went to the opera house to meet allies for negotiations to seek military support. The Count stated his country too had suffered from the Germanic Empire's invasion, making it difficult to send troops. Fine then mentioned her duchy's precision mechanics, suggesting that if the British Empire fully supported their cause, these loyal technicians would likely serve the British Empire as well. The Count found the proposal appealing, but noted that the ties between the 2 nations were not yet strong enough. However, Fine asked what if her duchy was the homeland of Prince Henry's wife, the heir to the British Empire. Indeed, to preserve her homeland, Fine was willing to be a bargaining chip in a marriage alliance and had even passed the Grand Ducal position to her cousin's unborn child in her stead. The Count acknowledged Fine's dedication to her country. At that moment, he received a secret letter, admitting his admiration for Fine's resolve as a princess, but lamenting that it was all too late. Just moments ago, the Germanic Empire launched a blitzkrieg, breaking through the duchy's borders. While the opera house was alive with song and dance, the duchy's land was engulfed in warfare. Fine had barely recovered from her shock when her bodyguard was killed right outside the door, and the Empire's agents burst in. The Count was also surprised. Fine realized it was too late. The agents noted her striking appearance and presumed the Emperor would be pleased. Following the Emperor's orders, Fine was taken to be flown to New Berlin. Alongside her on the aircraft was the refrigerated box she had seen on the train. As the plane crossed the duchy's borders, her people were still resisting below. Fine believed her nationals would resist to the end, but a soldier suggested using her as a hostage to deter further resistance. Angered, Fine seized a guard's gun during a moment of turbulence but was shot in the arm. The guard urged her not to struggle, yet Fine declared she was the heir to the duchy, trusted by her people, and vowed never to let them down, ready to fight for her country to the last drop of her blood. Amidst the standoff, no one noticed the red-haired girl in the refrigerated box behind Fine had awoken. Upon opening her eyes, the girl saw Fine standing before her and loudly declared her own name. This scene mirrored one from her childhood, where an injured girl had stood in front of her. The red-haired girl's magical powers erupted instantly, recognizing Fine. Indeed, Fine and the red-haired girl, named Izetta, had met in their childhood. Fine called her the Pure White Witch. Seeing Fine injured, Izetta immediately unleashed her powers. The plane was torn in half on the spot, and a gun was used as a flying device. Izetta grabbed the falling Fine and wept bitterly. The long-awaited reunion between Izetta and the princess filled their hearts with joy and excitement, almost causing them to crash into a snow mountain. Meanwhile, the German Air Force received news of the plane's accident and immediately sent fighters to investigate. They saw Izetta flying with Fine in midair. The leading officer, Basler, was surprised and cautioned his soldiers not to attack rashly. Seeing the emblem on the German planes, Izetta remembered her village being massacred. Gritting her teeth, she decided to counterattack. Fine was worried about Izetta using magic recklessly, but Izetta insisted it was to protect someone important and believed her grandmother would support her. Izetta also noticed Fine's injuries worsening and was determined to get her to safety. Fine never imagined that her childhood dream of flying with Izetta would come true in such a bizarre way after so many years. As planes pursued them, Izetta bit her finger and sprinkled blood, whose magic pierced the oncoming aircraft, stunning the pilots. In this era of science, the existence of a real witch was astonishing. After using her powers, Izetta felt uneasy, realizing she had taken lives, so she held Fine tightly, navigating over the mountains. However, Izetta's magic was running low. Seeing more planes approaching, Fine told Izetta not to move and face the planes head-on. Fine refused to let Izetta dirty her hands alone, so using the flying gun Izetta piloted, she aimed at the approaching aircraft and successfully damaged its wing, allowing them to escape. Basler was still in disbelief that he had actually seen a witch. After landing, Izetta found her magic nearly depleted. She tore her clothes to bandage Fine's wounds, abandoned the flying gun, and carried Fine on her back to seek refuge in a fortress. At the same time, the Duke's king was bedridden due to illness. However, due to a sneak attack by the Germanic Empire, the temperamental general immediately declared that their soldiers were highly spirited and vowed that the German troops would not return unscathed. Yet, the Chancellor warned that war was not so simple, especially against the Germanic Empire. With the princess missing, they even considered seeking help from the Pure White Witch, but the king dismissed this as impossible. Despondent injured soldiers trudged back. During this, Major Hans, the leader, offered his horse upon hearing a woman's voice in the bushes, suspecting an ambush. He rushed over with his gun and found Izetta carrying Fine. Recognizing Fine as the princess, they immediately called for a medic. Hans gave Izetta a set of military clothes. Izetta entered the tent where the medic was treating Fine, removing a bullet from her arm and preparing to stitch it up. He also discovered a long cut on Fine's abdomen. Izetta felt guilty about the wound, but the medic said it was old and not related to her. However, Izetta knew she had caused it. Previously, Fine was walking her dog in the countryside and encountered Izetta communicating with spirits by the riverbank. The princess, a believer in the Pure White Witch, was curious about Izetta, who appeared to be a witch, but was not afraid. She remarked that Izetta floating in the air was too beautiful and must be a good witch. Both, along with the dog, sneezed in the water and laughed together. They hung their coats on a tree branch to dry and lay on a wooden bridge chatting. Izetta, unaware of Fine's identity, found her as beautiful as a princess from a story. Before meeting Fine, Izetta had wandered with her grandmother because she could not fully control her powers and thus could not settle in one place. Izetta was despairing over her magical powers, fearing she might never master them. Her grandmother mentioned that Izetta was unfortunate since her fellow witches had long passed away, possibly making her the last witch. Despite her strong abilities, surpassing all other witches, her powers were of little use in modern times and could bring misfortune to those around her. She was advised never to use magic in front of others, but she revealed her powers to Fine. who found them beautiful rather than frightening, quickly leading to their friendship. Initially disliking her magic, Izetta's view gradually changed due to Fine's positive and cheerful demeanor. After Fine's injuries were treated, the doctor also attended to the scrapes on Izetta's legs and hands, asking if they were friends. Izetta responded that she did not deserve to be the princess's friend. Fine was her lifesaver. Hans noticed Izetta constantly by Fine's side and told her about Fine's achievements, noting that although high-ranking, she was beloved by the people because she loved them like her own children. When Fine woke up, Hans immediately called the medic. The next day, the army moved on, taking Fine to a nearby dilapidated fortress. Fine was unbothered by the harsh conditions, content with just shelter from the elements, and quickly began working, getting updates on the front lines from Hans. The front line was still resisting, and those who had retreated were all injured. Without a way to cross the river, survival was doubtful. Fine did not blame Hans or the defeated soldiers, saying that without them, resistance would have ceased. She asked the soldiers to call Izetta and urged her to leave the battlefield. Fine did not want to involve Izetta in the war, acknowledging that Izetta had already broken several rules for her. Fine admitted that she rarely made friends without regard to her status, but Izetta was one of those few. She did not want Izetta to get hurt. Izetta remembered how Fine, as a child, would get hurt, but insist she was fine. She decided to make Fine her hope. Meanwhile, Berkman, responsible for the escort, investigated the crash site. He found no bodies of Fine or Izetta, nor any signs of parachutes, leading him to suspect the rumors about the witch might be true. He resolved to capture both Izetta and Fine. The Duchy's tanks were no match for the German tanks, and the frontline Duchy soldiers were extremely tense, finding solace only in pictures of their families. The Duchy was a good place with historic fortresses, but everyone knew that a serious sweep by the German forces would overrun them in less than 30 minutes. So, when they saw bombers in the sky, a soldier froze in place, and an old soldier had to pull him into a trench, but their prospects remained bleak. At that moment, Izetta told Fine she wanted to protect her country. Fine disagreed, pointing out that the enemy had a massive army of tens of thousands. Izetta believed she could manage, but Fine, accepting her good intentions, did not want her involved in the dangerous war. Then an intelligence officer burst in, reporting that the front had been bombed. An old soldier died protecting new recruits, who peeked out to find devastation and could only hear cries for medics. The bombed city had to evacuate its residents. If the small town of Korneburg also fell, the duchy would be wide open to the German advance. Their current option was to evacuate local residents. Such brutal bombings were merely a cruel joke among the high command at the German headquarters. After bombing, tanks were immediately sent to sweep the area, while the duchy struggled to intercept them, almost with no chance of success, merely sacrificing lives to buy time for civilians to find refuge. The princess lamented that sacrificing soldiers' lives was merely to buy time with no chance of victory. Despite knowing their likely death, the soldiers faced everything calmly, which she found deeply saddening. Unsure how to help, the princess felt helpless. Meanwhile, the frontline new recruit, saved earlier, was rushed by another veteran to load bullets into a machine gun. They were notified to retreat from the first trench to the second, hurriedly grabbing their equipment. On their way, the new recruit missed his family. The German land forces were halted by artillery, prompting them to request air support. The retreating duchy forces decided to take the weapons stored in the fortress, unsure when they might need them. Izetta saw these weapons. Fine and Hans were discussing what to do next when injured soldiers approached Fine, hoping to return to the Korneburg front to delay the enemy further. The princess stated that their current weapons were ineffective and going to the front would mean certain death. Their duty was to protect their homeland, not seek revenge. She believed they might sacrifice themselves one day, but not now. The soldiers at the front were already buying time. Their task was to ensure they did not hinder the retreat. Fine felt guilty. Believing as a princess, she should be finding ways for her soldiers to survive, not sacrifice their lives. Feeling powerless saddened her deeply. From a distance, Izetta watched Fine with tears in her eyes, her heart also aching. When the frontline soldiers spotted enemy aircraft, they immediately reported back. The command center, realizing they could delay no longer, decided to retreat with the main forces, preparing to establish defenses further back, determined to protect the capital at all costs. the new recruit's teammate was killed again. As the new recruit picked up the weapon, he looked up and saw enemy planes. The German command was celebrating with champagne when frontline soldiers felt all was lost. Suddenly, Izetta appeared above the battlefield, wielding a long rifle and shooting down the planes one by one. Although the frontline soldiers did not understand what was happening, they knew help had arrived. Izetta used the rifle to pierce a plane that attempted to crash into the fortress. Then, holding the broken rifle, she clumsily landed near the frontline trenches, running into the new recruit and accidentally falling against a tree. Others, seeing Izetta in the duchy's military uniform, worriedly asked if she was injured. Izetta quickly sat up, unharmed, and inquired about the location of nearby weapons. Learning they were in the fortress above, she borrowed a machine gun from 2 soldiers and flew to the fortress, retrieving an iron sword. Using the sword as a shield, she flipped tanks on the battlefield, leaving everyone stunned and unable to grasp what was occurring, including Hans. Upon learning that Izetta had joined the fight, Fine asked Hans to send her message to the front line using Morse code. Hans conveyed that Izetta was Fine's dear friend and the reincarnation of the pure white witch, a protector of the duchy. The soldiers, inspired, grabbed their weapons, eager to fight alongside the pure white witch. Meanwhile, the German command, hearing of their forces' defeat and their premature celebration, trembled. Izetta returned to Fine, admitting she couldn't help but act. Fine embraced her, relieved she was safe. The soldiers cheered in celebration of their victory, shouting, "Long live the lily! Long live the lily!" The capital's general and chancellor also received news of the victory. While the general was satisfied with the win, the chancellor instructed frontline personnel to gather information about Izetta. Thanks to Izetta's victory, the soldiers sang a triumphant song in honor of the two. On one side, the king of the capital received news of the return of the reincarnation of the pure white witch and passed away from mixed emotions. Hans did not get to see his father for the last time. Upon his return, he first sent off the king in his role as the princess, then wept as a daughter holding her father. Meanwhile, the emperor of the Germanic Empire held the commander responsible for the attack on Kahlenberg accountable. The commander, surprised by the unexpected defeat, quickly explained they encountered a new weapon, a witch riding a machine gun. The emperor laughed, surprised to encounter a real witch as he believed in their existence. He decided to reduce the commander's punishment, keeping his title but confiscating his lands and assigning him as a prison warden. He then ordered Berkman to be summoned to hear his account, believing in the existence of witches in modern times. On another side, Izetta woke up in a luxurious room with a black-haired maid, Bianca, at her side. Bianca explained that Izetta and Fine arrived at the capital last night, and Izetta fell asleep due to exhaustion. Izetta, scared she had dirtied the bed, quickly sat up, but the maid reassured her that as the pure white witch who saved the duchy, a few beds were inconsequential. Izetta was surprised to find herself the pure white witch. The maid, Lotte, was Fine's personal maid sent to take care of Izetta. Lotte, liking Izetta, quickly helped her undress to freshen up. Elsewhere, Fine, unable to grieve her father's death, immediately immersed herself in command. She consulted with Chancellor Sieghard and decided to keep her father's death secret for now to avoid demoralizing the troops. The general was curious whether the legendary witch could indeed win the war at the front. Hans affirmed Izetta's proven track record, but Fine mentioned that Izetta acted out of sympathy for the duchy, and she hoped Izetta would not use her magical powers if possible, as they came at a cost. At that moment, Lotte was scrubbing Izetta's back and mentioned that Kahlenberg, saved by Izetta, was her relative's hometown. She was also curious about Izetta's magical powers. Izetta replied that it wasn't convenient to demonstrate her powers there. Bianca believed Izetta could fight on the front lines, and that displaying her powers should not be difficult. However, Bianca was always suspicious of Izetta. The concept of a witch was known only in legends, and she had never seen a real witch, so she wanted to see if Izetta truly had magical powers. As Bianca approached, Lotte tried to stop her but accidentally knocked over a statue. Both Bianca and Izetta reached out to stop the statue, but a water jug from the statue hit Izetta on the head. Consequently, Bianca informed Fine that Izetta had accidentally been injured and a doctor was treating her wound. Chancellor Sieghard immediately realized what Fine was worried about. Therefore, Fine asked Izetta why she didn't use her magic to avoid the falling water jug, as her powers could have easily done so. Izetta confessed that a witch's power does not come from within but from the ley lines of the land. Some underground ley lines are powerful, while some areas have none. When Fine fainted and was injured, Izetta had to escort her on foot because there were no ley lines in the capital, making it impossible for her to use her magic there. This was a closely guarded secret among witches, not to be revealed to the outside world, as anyone who knew it would have to be killed. But Izetta mentioned that she was the only witch left, making the secret irrelevant. The general was very anxious upon hearing this, realizing that Izetta could not be used except in critical moments. A minister suggested treating Izetta as a secret weapon for protection, but Sieghard proposed promoting the existence of Izetta. Rumors of the pure white witch were already spreading among the people. Hiding Izetta's existence would only raise suspicions. He suggested capitalizing on the victory at Kallenberg by publicizing Izetta's presence and declaring that the duchy possesses the strongest pure white witch who would punish any attackers. This was essentially a threat. Fine did not want Izetta to become a weapon, but she could not refuse for the sake of the nation. Izetta also agreed to this plan. Sieghard said he planned to introduce Izetta to someone else, Elvira, a talented woman who once worked at the news bureau and is now Fine's governess. Elvira will be responsible for publicizing Izetta's identity as a witch. In 2 weeks, Izetta will attend the coronation ceremony with Fine, where journalists from around the world will be present. The event will be broadcasted through radio, newspapers, and videos. Elvira took measurements of Izetta and Fine to tailor the best gowns for them. Meanwhile, Sieghard and Fine worked with Izetta to survey the capital's ley lines, trying to find usable energy sources. Izetta asked if the capital of the former pure white witch was here. Fine shook her head, explaining it was the old capital, now in ruins. Izetta expressed a desire to visit the old capital because her grandmother had told her about secrets hidden beneath the castle. Fine arranged for Bianca to accompany Izetta to investigate the old castle, where they indeed found something hidden underneath. On the way back, Bianca asked Izetta why she pledged loyalty to Fine. Izetta replied that Fine was her savior. During their wanderings, Izetta and her grandmother had been taken in by a small village. However, one day, the house provided by Sieghard was burned down. When the villagers confronted her, Izetta denied involvement, but they didn't believe her. As her powers were about to spiral out of control, Fine intervened, swearing on her family's honor that Izetta had been with her all along and even shielded Izetta from the attack. Since then, Izetta has trusted Fine immensely. Bianca was deeply moved, admiring her princess's gentleness and kindness. Willing to sacrifice her life for Fine, and seeing Izetta's loyalty, Bianca now considered her an ally. 2 weeks later, the ceremony took place, attended by journalists invited through Elvira's contacts. Izetta had discovered a ley line map of the entire continent beneath the old castle, enabling her to know where magic could be used. Fine changed into her coronation attire, and while Izetta complimented how beautiful she looked, Fine was concerned whether Izetta was afraid. After today, the revival of the pure white witch would be known worldwide. Izetta remembered her grandmother's warning that the pure white witch was a traitor and urged her not to repeat the past mistakes. However, Izetta chose to stand up for Fine after hearing her speak to the soldiers. She hoped for a world where no one had to fight, where everyone could live well. She wanted to see such a country and was willing to follow Fine to prevent war across the continent. Fine decided to meet Izetta's expectations. The coronation went smoothly, but as the new queen, she needed to reveal Izetta's existence. She introduced Izetta as a descendant of the pure white witch at the abandoned castle, chosen for its strong ley line magic. Izetta, riding her flying spear and wielding the national sacred sword, demonstrated flying and attack magic in front of all the reporters, whose cameras flashed non-stop. Elvira felt the plan was going perfectly. Izetta then lifted Fine in her arms, and Fine declared to the world that if anyone dared to attack the duchy, they would face the witch's wrath. The emperor of the Germanic Empire found this interesting, and his major, Berkman, confirmed that the photos were genuine. At this moment, an advisor by the emperor suggested that their attack on the duchy was to secure a transport route between the Mediterranean and Africa. "Don't forget, this is the key point," he emphasized. The emperor nodded in agreement, but he was still intent on capturing Izetta, the witch. Berkman, however, felt that since the duchy was openly declaring Izetta's existence rather than hiding her, she would likely strike at them next. He believed that only by demonstrating her power in front of reporters and achieving a war victory would the journalists acknowledge the existence of a witch to the world. Sure enough, the emperor soon received a report from an intelligence officer that a border city had been attacked by the witch. Izetta, accompanied by a plane full of journalists and an array of medieval weapons, quickly secured a victory. The reporters announced that a modern witch was equivalent to an entire division on her own. The news spread worldwide rapidly. Rickert thought this was exaggerated. She had only defeated a battalion, yet the reporters were claiming she had defeated a division. Berkman noted that the typically invincible Germanic Empire had suffered 2 defeats, and naturally, the journalists from allied countries celebrated. Contrarily, the emperor was pleased with this development and generously funded Berkman to capture the witch. Consequently, Berkman met with a soldier, Basler, the sole surviving pilot from a previous encounter with Izetta when she had helped Finet escape. Basler confirmed he had fought against Izetta and described her abilities as extraordinarily powerful. 2 people sat on a gun, flying at speeds up to 400 kilometers per hour. No one except him could catch up with Izetta. Therefore, Berkman rehired Basler, preparing to recruit him for a special witch-hunting unit. After speaking with Basler, Berkman quickly realized that Izetta's powers were not invincible. Otherwise, she wouldn't have taken 2 days to reach Kohlenbell after battling Basler, and only appeared on the battlefield after they attacked Kohlenbell. If she were truly invincible, that journey would have taken just minutes. There must be secrets about her powers they were unaware of. Moreover, if Izetta truly had omnipotent powers, she wouldn't need to be so public. Why not just fly over and kill the emperor directly? Hence, Berkman concluded that while the witch's powers were strong, they were not unbeatable. Otherwise, witches would have ruled the world long ago. By deduction, he guessed that the witch's powers had limitations and weaknesses. Berkman believed they didn't need to do anything because the High Command would inevitably urge the emperor to attack the duchy. They could act afterwards. As news of Izetta spread, countries began to send confidential meeting invitations to Finet. The world seemed to accept the existence of this mythical-like witch. Finet thought the German forces had made too many enemies. The world despised them and hoped for a hero to emerge. Even if Izetta was a fabrication, they were willing to applaud her. Finet credited all this to Izetta, who was modestly embarrassed by the praise. The generals looked at a map of ley lines. Magic could be used within the red circles but not outside. Izetta wished she could use magic across the entire map. The generals quickly clarified they were not blaming her. The ministers believed that after Izetta had embarrassed the Germanic Empire twice, they wouldn't attack again. But as fate would have it, the Germanic Empire attacked precisely in an area outside the ley lines. However, Finet and Sieghard had anticipated this. Exposing Izetta was a huge gamble, and the outcome of this war would determine if they had won the bet. The Empire's soldiers claimed there was no witch as their front pushed forward. Meanwhile, the new recruits Izetta had saved kept promoting her existence in their unit, then led the troops to retreat according to military orders. At that moment, Izetta looked at the female soldier disguised as herself inside the tent. These people were part of a daredevil squad, trained by the former king for Finet, and their help was crucial for the plan. At this moment, Izetta made a suggestion, and Finet's plan came into play. They deployed a plane with a wooden dummy resembling Izetta to fly overhead. They then shot down the dummy riding on a spear, and the remaining team members cleaned up the debris. Izetta stood atop a mountain, threatening in the name of a witch. Snipers stationed around her immediately disarmed people below. Meanwhile, they had placed bombs on the mountain. At Izetta's command, signaling punishment, the bombs would explode, causing boulders to fall on the Empire soldiers below. Izetta, who was part of this performance, was quite frightened, as she had little magical power here. Unexpectedly, Berkman had already planted a spy in the Principality to gather intelligence during this battle. The spy was looking for new recruits to learn more about Izetta. While the new recruits were fetching water by the river, their photograph was swept away by the current. Following the water, the spy overheard Chancellor Sieghard and a general arguing. Sieghard revealed that the falling rocks were actually pre-planned bombs, but the general was upset about Izetta appearing publicly as she couldn't use magic here. Despite their secrecy, Sieghard heard the water and approached with a gun, but he only found the drifting photograph and not the new recruits. Hearing the secret, the recruits didn't stay longer, quickly grabbed their water buckets, and rushed out. The new recruits ran into the spy embedded in their team. The spy asked what was wrong, and the recruits said they had overheard a secret about Izetta. Izetta was struggling to adapt in the capital because she felt unhelpful during the previous battle and wanted to contribute more in everyday life. However, Fine praised Izetta for her excellent performance that day. Due to the recent battle, the Germanic Empire temporarily withdrew its focus from the Principality and targeted the British Empire, bringing a brief period of peace to the Principality. Fine credited much of this peace to Izetta and mentioned it was a day off, asking Izetta if she wanted to do anything special. At that moment, Elvira stepped forward, saying she had a task for Izetta, which involved wearing a corset. Elvira wanted Izetta to try on Fine's dress. During the fitting, it was clear that although the waist fit, Izetta's bust was too large for the dress, which was even slightly big for Fine. Elvira looked at Fine with a hint of sympathy. Eventually, they decided Izetta would wear her own dress and learn noble etiquette, starting with dance etiquette. They brought in Bianca to be Izetta's dance partner, even tricking Bianca into thinking she would dance with the princess later. Although teaching Izetta was challenging, the demonstration dance with Fine went smoothly, leaving Bianca satisfied. Afterwards, the three enjoyed afternoon tea. Despite being a queen, Fine only received rationed sugar due to the war's impact on resources. However, after Izetta's victory, Fine used this as an excuse to distribute some items from the palace, allowing local dessert shops to receive supplies and make delicious treats. Fine hadn't had cherry pie in a long time and couldn't help but smile at the thought. Thus, Izetta suggested they all go to a dessert shop together. Elsewhere, Sieghard had already identified the owner of the photograph and sent an agent disguised as a journalist to approach them. Elvira, seeing the agent depart, knew Sieghard was about to make his move. Sieghard stated that during wartime, he could not afford to be soft-hearted, even if it meant being labeled as despicable and shameless. He believed it was essential to eliminate threats in their infancy. Meanwhile, Rickert, accompanied by Basler, met with the designer of a mechanism. The Germanic Empire stood out in the war partly because the emperor generously funded scientific research and espionage to steal advanced technology from other nations. Rickert, a young nobleman, did not want to be underestimated and aimed to prove himself before inheriting his title. He brought Basler to showcase a newly developed fighter jet. At the same time, Berkman was communicating with the director of the 9th Research Bureau. Both the director and the emperor believed in the existence of witches, piquing Berkman's curiosity about what this secretive bureau was researching. With the highest authority granted by the emperor, Berkman successfully entered the bureau. Meanwhile, Fine and Izetta, in disguise, were tasting cherry pie in a dessert shop. Fine thought her disguise was perfect, but a shop employee recognized her as the queen and quietly expressed gratitude. It turned out that the guards and the shopkeeper were aware of Fine's disguised escapade. Embarrassed, Fine stood up hastily, accidentally knocking over a cake. Izetta tried to catch it, losing her glasses in the process, and the people around immediately recognized both Fine and Izetta. Fine had to step into her role as queen and gave an inspiring speech to the patrons, promising to try to ensure everyone could enjoy such delicious treats every day. The public was delighted, and the incident ended smoothly. Komaki said that Fine's approachable image was good, but such incidents should not happen again. Meanwhile, Sieghard announced he needed to visit the British Empire to discuss matters regarding witches and exchange information with their contacts. However, Fine felt that since the discussion would involve Izetta's magical powers, it would be more appropriate for her and Izetta to attend in person. While they were debating, Sieghard received a call from an agent who had investigated a new recruit and discovered a Germanic Empire spy near them. Sieghard's expression turned serious, and he agreed that Fine and Izetta should go to the meeting, deciding to stay behind to handle the new recruit. Izetta planned to take Fine across the sea on a machine gun. Unbeknownst to them, the spy had already taken the new recruit away. The spy, posing as the new team leader, pretended to help the recruit resolve his confusion, trying to coax out secrets about Izetta. However, the recruit hesitated, and the leader, growing impatient, threatened him at gunpoint and shot him in the leg, severing a major artery to force him to reveal Izetta's secrets quickly or die within 10 minutes. The spy then threatened by naming the recruit's family members, pushing the recruit to the brink of revealing Izetta's secrets. Just then, Sieghard arrived at the scene and, along with another agent, arrested the spy. Sieghard then asked the recruit if he was willing to sacrifice everything for his country. The recruit nodded, and Sieghard shot him, saying that nearly revealing secrets meant he had to be silenced for the nation's future. Sometimes, apologies must be made for the greater good. As Izetta was crossing the channel with Fine, the alliance meeting of the British Empire began. The meeting touched upon the Empire's aircraft carrier and noted the Germanic Empire Emperor's recent interest in the pure White Witch. Although the carrier was not yet operational, its potential threat was clear. After discussing the carrier, the conversation naturally shifted to Izetta, the witch. Half of those present at the meeting did not believe in the existence of witches, dismissing it as mere propaganda. Thus, Count invited Fine to speak, and the skeptical allies were stunned when Izetta used her magic to open a window and flew on a gun in front of them, even making water bottles float in midair. This convinced the others of the reality of witches. Fine aimed to persuade them to deploy troops against the Germanic Empire, noting the difficulty of convincing their citizens. However, she and Izetta promised to defeat the Empire's carrier, named Dragon Fang, demonstrating the witch's power. After the allies left, Fine thanked the Count, who mentioned he owed her a favor from before, and introduced her to a lieutenant colonel who was a pilot. The carrier was docked in the lieutenant colonel's former hometown, and he assured them of his commitment to help defeat it, although his expression seemed odd. Fine and Izetta reviewed the map and noticed that the carrier was moored in an area with broad ley lines, ideal for Izetta to use her magic without restraint. Noticing Izetta's nervousness about sharing a room, Fine playfully tackled her to lighten the mood. While Izetta expressed concerns about facing the carrier, she was determined to succeed. Meanwhile, Rickert and Basler were on the carrier. Basler had brought a new fighter jet and learned the carrier was not yet fully equipped. Rickert reminded him that the details about the jet were still confidential. Fine and Izetta also discussed the battle plan with the Allies, who had mapped out a route filled with magical energy. They planned to carry a large quantity of bombs to the site. Although Fine was not required on the front lines, she made sure to see Izetta off on the lieutenant colonel's plane, urging her to return safely. The lieutenant colonel spoke with Izetta about magic as they headed to the front line. Izetta, who initially disliked her powers, now saw them differently since she could protect those she cared about. Upon reaching the designated position, Izetta jumped off the plane, riding on a gun, and touched the attached torpedoes. The crew on the plane was surprised to see Izetta truly flying. She then carried the torpedoes towards the river, planning to hide them under the aircraft carrier. Finding the precise location would split the carrier in two, under the impact of 4 torpedoes. Izetta, carrying the torpedoes, navigated around mountains to find the port, but discovered that their plan had been exposed, and the carrier had left the port. Intent on pursuing, Izetta didn't realize it was a trap set by Basler, who led an Air Force squadron with a new plane. During the attack by the Germanic Empire's Air Force, 1 torpedo was destroyed, and another had its tail smashed. Izetta used a torpedo to strike the attacking warship, and Basler's plane also launched an attack on her. Not expecting the plane to catch up, Izetta submerged the torpedoes to avoid any mishaps and focused on dodging Basler's attacks. Seeing the situation, the lieutenant colonel and the remaining pilots immediately went to support Izetta in the valley. Dodging attacks, Izetta noticed issues with the magic ley lines, causing her to occasionally plummet. This was observed by Rickert and Berkman from a distance. After evading Basler's attacks, the British Empire's lieutenant colonel's plane joined in support. Izetta seized the opportunity, controlling the 2 submerged torpedoes to resurface. As the carrier opened its deck to launch planes, she smashed the torpedoes into the carrier's interior and penetrated it with another, completely destroying the vessel. Basler wanted to continue the pursuit, but Berkman advised him to stop, noting that they had the intelligence they needed. The Emperor of the Empire knew the aircraft carrier would surely be sunk by the British Empire, so he deliberately equipped it lightly as bait to expose Izetta's weakness. Meanwhile, the Empire was experimenting with creating artificial witches, so Berkman needed to obtain the witch's secret hidden beneath the old ducal castle. Rickert requested this mission. In the Middle Ages, witches were not accepted, and witch hunts were common. During one such hunt, a prince of the Alps kingdom was injured, but saved by a young witch with white hair. Initially fearful, the prince gradually saw the witch as a gentle girl and fell in love with her. Though she refused to become his queen, she promised to help him with her powers if needed. After returning from battle, Izetta fell ill with a cold but recovered under Finé's care. They planned to attend a banquet to discuss a combat agreement among allies, hoping to bring back good news. Elsewhere, Rickert parachuted into the duchy at night to access the castle's secret, but was blown off course by the night wind. Disguised as a civilian, he was unsuspected by the locals, who were simple and kind, even offering him apples. Midway, Rickert dropped an apple and accidentally fell into the water. Lotta and Lotta, dressed casually, mistook him for a local merchant and offered him a ride. Rickert claimed he had studied abroad and returned to enlist due to the grim situation, but was rejected in the physical exam. Lotta admired his courage, suggesting he could support the war effort in logistics, as not all soldiers carry guns. Lotta remarked that although their country was small, everyone hoped for peace and tranquility. Rickert felt conflicted, questioning whether he was fighting against such simple people. Sigurd informed Elvira of suspicious activity near the capital, planning to send Lotta to investigate. The exposure of the secret room was uncertain, but any exposure had to be contained, otherwise a recruit's death would be in vain. Sigurd wanted to resolve these issues before Finé and Izetta returned. Rickert followed Lotta and others to the capital, staying at an inn run by Lotta's relatives, close to the old castle. He delayed his actions, instead reading the fairy tale of the Pure White Witch. In the story, the prince died in war soon after returning to his kingdom. At a critical moment, the Pure White Witch appeared with her wand and temporarily saved the nation, deciding to become its guardian in memory of the prince. She protected the duchy until her death. During dinner, Rickert discussed the story with Lotta, who loved the plot, appreciating the genuine love between the characters despite their inability to unite. Rickert heard there was another ending to the story, as witches were unlikely to be favored in that era, and the prince reportedly married someone else, which upset Lotta. Lotta revealed Lotta's deep romanticism, prompting Rickert to consider apologizing. However, as he was about to do so, he heard a scream from inside, burst in, and found Lotta helping Lotta bathe. Splashed with water and embarrassed, he rushed out blushing. Elsewhere, Lotta received a photo from a subordinate and prepared to search the old castle for the escaped mole. By this time, the mole had already met with Rickert and revealed that a new soldier had discovered some secrets about Izetta. They suspected someone in the duchy silenced the recruit. It was confirmed that the old castle contained secrets related to Izetta, prompting plans for an internal exploration the next day. Meanwhile, the count's banquet began, drawing attention with Finé and Izetta's arrival. Finé wanted to dance with Izetta to ease the tension and took her to the courtyard. There, they encountered Berkman in disguise and a white-haired girl. Izetta felt uneasy about the girl's gaze, who unexpectedly kissed and bit Izetta, swallowing her blood and then fainting. Berkman claimed the white-haired girl was a fan of Izetta. Just as Finé was questioning their identity, the Count passed by, allowing Berkman to escape. Finé also reached an agreement with the Allied nations, with the United States promising military support, reversing the situation and bringing joy to Finé and Izetta. At the same time, Rickert and the mole were near the old castle, regretting not having a proper chat with Lotta. Rickert's visit to the castle was motivated by notes written by a priest guarding the Pure White Witch's tomb, collected by Berkman. The notes revealed a story different from the legend, depicting a tragic end for the Pure White Witch. When she reunited with the prince, he had a new queen, but still loved the witch who saved the nation. The new queen found this unbearable. After the prince's death, the witch's secrets were exposed, and she was betrayed to the enemy, tortured under heresy charges, and ultimately executed by burning. Fearing the witch's revenge, people sealed her secrets underground after the queen's death. Rickert, having obtained Izetta's blood, managed to unlock the underground room, finding a map indicating areas where witches' magic might fail, revealing their vulnerabilities. While Rickert was photographing the map, his blood activated a mechanism in the room, causing half a stone to fall out. Although Rickert did not understand the stone's significance, he collected it. At that moment, Lotta and her team stormed in. Both parties were surprised upon seeing each other. Lotta then decisively opened fire. Rickert and the mole jumped into an underground tunnel, where he handed the item to the mole, having been shot in the abdomen. Preparing to use his last moments to distract their pursuers, Lotta and Rickert exchanged gunfire on the rooftop. Rickert apologized to Lotta, expressing regret for shattering her fairy tale illusions, acknowledging that many tragedies are rewritten into happy endings, much like their own situation. Rickert had developed feelings for Lotta, but knew they had no future. However, he did not shoot Lotta and would not betray his country, ultimately choosing to die by her hand. The mole escaped with the item, but was killed by a sniper. Unexpectedly, the seemingly harmless carriage driver, who was also an undercover agent from the Germanic Empire, took the item from the dead mole. Meanwhile, there was discord within the Allied nations. Before defeating the Germanic Empire, high-ranking officials in the United States of America proposed a swift military action to eradicate both the Germanic Empire and the Duchy, fearing the witch's power. The Germanic Empire was unpopular globally, facing spontaneous resistance movements, though these were no match for it. However, the appearance of Izetta, the heir of the pure white witch, sparked spontaneous cheers. As the war front moved, Izetta gained fame worldwide, even inspiring comics based on her. 3 months after returning from the Allied nations, the Germanic Empire had ceased its attacks on the Duchy, instead lingering outside the borderline. Finet and Izetta enjoyed a period of peace, but during an intelligence review with Lotta, Sieghard suspected that the Empire might have forcefully extracted Izetta's blood during her capture. This allowed them to open a secret room beneath the castle and revisit old rumors, leading to its discovery. However, they found nothing on any bodies and assumed nothing was taken. Lotta recalled Rickert's mention of a tragic end, but hesitated to speak of it. Sieghard, aware of the legend's true details, had a mysterious pouch in his drawer. Meanwhile, a red gemstone retrieved from the underground castle was fashioned into a necklace worn by the synthetic witch. The general soon received intelligence about new recruits, indicating that the Germanic Empire was initiating warfare at the border again, a highly dangerous location where weapons specifically designed to counter Izetta had been developed. However, modifications to Izetta's weapons were also made on their side. Finet believed that a direct counterattack could inflict significant damage on the Germanic Empire, making them cautious about further assaults. Yet Sieghard felt the situation was not so straightforward. That evening, Izetta and Finet discussed matters in the attic, hopeful that a successful battle could lead to a ceasefire agreement with the Germanic Empire, albeit temporarily, which was still preferable to the ongoing deadly conflict. Though far from the peaceful nation Izetta envisioned, she found the country beautiful and was willing to fight on the front lines to defend its current state, even if it was just a small step toward a better future. Upon reaching the Köln-Bell front line, they were informed of a diversion by the enemy, who had attacked another location. The new weapon was merely a decoy. Izetta swiftly flew to the Seren corridor with the upgraded weapon, where the dense magical energy promised a high chance of success. As she began her descent to halt the enemy's advance, she was intercepted in the air by another staff, wielded by a previously encountered white-haired girl. The individual identified herself as Sophie, once known as the Pure White Witch. Sophie urged Izetta to cease her actions, but Berlman knew the truth. Sophie, the Pure White Witch, was actually a clone. After the Empire located the guardian of the Pure White Witch's tomb, they used notes left behind to find her burial site and retrieved part of her remains. Years of research led to the successful cloning of the Pure White Witch, which explains why the Emperor of the Germanic Empire firmly believed in the existence of witches and sought the remaining ones. However, the only witch they found was Izetta, who unexpectedly became their enemy. This led them to decide on reviving the Pure White Witch, utilizing her powerful magic. However, the cloned Pure White Witch had no consciousness or magic of her own and acted solely on commands. The only time Sophie reacted was upon seeing Izetta's blood. Thus, Berlman took Sophie to a banquet where she bit Izetta, obtaining her blood. Regaining her senses with the blood, Sophie also acquired a magical stone and a map, setting the stage for their subsequent attack plan. Berlman stated he tightly held the reins on the witch. Sophie told Izetta she was there to stop her, mentioning her past involvement in war using witch powers, which she regretted as inappropriate. She did not want Izetta to make the same mistakes, but Izetta had already pledged to fight for Finet, resolved to battle no matter the outcome. Thus, Sophie decided to kill Izetta, considering her overly devoted to the princess and lacking her own opinions. Meanwhile, news reached the new recruits about another witch, and they headed to the front line. At that moment, Sophie used the magic stone within her staff, draining the ley line's magic. Izetta fell to the ground and was quickly bound by Sophie, who remarked that Izetta's current suffering was nothing compared to what she had endured before. The capture of Izetta caused morale at the front lines to falter, leading to a rapid collapse. Sophie decided to destroy the kingdom's heirs, leading an aerial assault on the capital and bombing it, including the new castle. Photos of Izetta's capture spread, and Fine, hearing of Izetta's defeat, was deeply concerned but was forced to retreat through underground tunnels to avoid capture. Meanwhile, Sophie had already bombed the front lines at Collinbell. New recruits arrived at the scene of Izetta's capture, surrounded by soldiers. A lieutenant colonel, gritting his teeth, crashed his plane into the ground, creating a diversion that allowed the new recruits to rescue Izetta. The soldiers, grateful for Izetta's sacrifices, urged the recruits to escape with her first. As the Germanic Empire attacked, the capital's residents, armed and with their children, evacuated. Satisfied with the destruction, Sophie reveled in her actions. News of the Germanic Empire harboring a witch spread, but they failed to capture Izetta and Fine. Sophie demanded the immediate capture of the duchy's royal family to make them suffer. On another note, the Emperor of the Germanic Empire publicly promoted Berkman, but took away his military authority, planning to control Sophie himself. Berkman showed no objection, though his expression was enigmatic. Izetta recalled her grandmother's warning not to follow in the pure white witch's footsteps, who had intervened in human affairs with her magic to win wars, and even took the original witch's power stone, a stone that shortens witches' lifespans and is taboo among them. Izetta woke from a dream to find Fine by her side, who, seeing Izetta awake, burst into tears, relieved that Izetta was unharmed. Fine comforted Izetta, telling her not to worry about the front lines and that she would explain everything in time. After being in a coma, Izetta had been unconscious for a month. They had fled the capital and hidden in a secret fortress in the Alps. Izetta felt guilty for not being able to protect the capital, but Fine assured her that it was not her fault. They had been too complacent, having been unprepared due to earlier successes. When Izetta brought up Sophie, Sighard frowned, realizing the pure white witch had indeed revived. He believed that if the pure white witch was truly awake, she would show no mercy to the duchy. Fine learned from Sighard the truth about the pure white witch, that her ancestors had betrayed her. The world now knew of the duchy's defeat and Izetta's magical weaknesses, and they feared the witch Sophie's power. The Alps had no magic, and Izetta noted that Sophie could use magic where she could not. Sighard explained that Sophie had a magic stone and was using it to draw power from the ley lines, controlling numerous bombs to prepare an attack on the British Empire. Sighard revealed the truth about the magic stone. Lands drained by the stone become depleted of magic. Izetta's defeat at the Selen corridor was likely because Sophie had drained the magic beforehand, setting a trap specifically for a witch with location-bound powers. Sighard knew this because his family had histories passed down from witches. Initially thinking these were just rumors, Sighard reinvestigated these family secrets after meeting the real witch Izetta and discovered his ancestor's diary, full of confessions. The diary detailed how his ancestor and the queen conspired to betray Sophie, handing her over to inquisitors for torture and exposing her secrets. New recruits arrived at the scene reporting that Sophie had led the Germanic forces in an attack on London, setting the city ablaze. Sophie's body was deteriorating quickly, with only 3 days left due to the toll of using the magic stone. However, Sophie was indifferent to her fate, focused only on destroying the duchy's allies and killing their heirs. In the lab, many clones of Sophie existed, but it was uncertain if they could retain her current memories. Sophie, feeling like a dead person already, showed no interest. The energy Sophie summoned from the ley lines had also been studied by the workshop, which was now developing new weapons. The workshop's female director was actually terrified of Sophie, who wanted nothing but the destruction of the duchy. Meanwhile, Basler scolded Berkman for disrupting the war's dynamics by bringing the witch into play. Berkman, now sidelined, noted that the Emperor had grown wary of him, forcing him to step back from his central role. At the same time, Izetta was struggling with rehabilitation, but making no progress. The general felt that 15-year-old Izetta should not spend her life paralyzed considering her a national hero. Yet, there were no better treatments available. Some advised Fine to go into exile and form a government in exile, but Izetta insisted she could still fight. Even if her legs were immobilized, she could still battle where ley lines existed. Fine realized that as long as she did not give up, Izetta would keep fighting. Fine blamed herself for involving Izetta in the war, and was grateful for her sacrifices, but did not want Izetta to sacrifice any more for her. With a heavy heart, Fine left the room to calm down, unaware that the situation with the Germanic Empire was escalating. The Emperor, believing he had control over the witch Sophie, proposed outrageously excessive treaties to various European nations. He planned to attack the Volga Confederation, akin to the Soviet Union during World War II, after the treaties were signed, intending to tear them up and wage war. His ultimate goal was to conquer Europe and then attack the United States of America. "Man, you're really overconfident," someone could say. Meanwhile, Izetta, regretting seeing Fine cry, was desperate to help and felt she hadn't yet repaid Fine for her kindness. At that moment, Sieghard stepped forward, suggesting he had a way to change the situation. He produced the remaining half of a magic stone. Sieghard had studied his ancestors' diaries, which revealed that the queen had tried to kill the witch out of jealousy, but with the prince dead, they had to obey the queen. They exploited Sophie's trust, luring her to a place where she couldn't use her magic, seizing her magic stone and handing her over to the Inquisitors. The broken magic stone mirrored Sophie's shattered trust in the nation. Remembering the pure white witch's resentful gaze, Sieghard was conflicted while giving the magic stone to Izetta. Elsewhere, Berkman visited Rickert's grave at the old castle. Someone approached him with news of the discovered location of the fleeing Fine, who had been unable to eat in recent days, only to face an enemy attack. The internal situation was mostly suppressed. Berkman suggested infiltrating the group, suspecting the Emperor found him too troublesome and planned to have him eliminated by his subordinates. Likely, Berkman was preparing to defect or escape amidst the chaos. A subordinate had captured hostages, threatening to execute them one by one unless Fine surrendered. Unable to watch her people die in vain, Fine stepped forward. As the officer mocked her, Izetta burst onto the scene. Upon seeing this, the officer and Berkman immediately fled. Lotta had been with Izetta when Sieghard explained that overusing the magic stone would shorten one's life. Lotta thought this was unacceptable. Izetta had already fought enough and was now nearly paralyzed, fighting with power that reduced her lifespan. Fine would never agree to this, and even Lotta couldn't bear to see Izetta continue. But Izetta insisted on fighting until the end, as she wanted to fight for Fine alone. Thus, Izetta charged through the scene with the stone. During his escape, Berkman decided to act against the officer, guessing that the Emperor had ordered his personal guard to kill him. The officer admitted it, and Berkman killed him on the spot, then threw down his weapon and surrendered to the approaching crowd, revealing the side effects of using the magic stone: severe pain and life force being consumed as the price of power. Fine was shocked by this. Berkman and Sieghard had a private conversation in the forest. Sieghard suspected Berkman was the designer behind Sophie, and both were well aware of each other's schemes. Berkman described Sieghard as a man who would do anything to achieve his goals. Remembering a recruit he had killed, Sieghard listened as Berkman proposed a deal, prompting Sieghard to tear open his own collar, revealing a film hidden inside. It showed a new weapon developed by the Germanic Empire based on the energy condensed from the magic stone. Actually, an atomic bomb. Berkman explained that the Germanic Empire planned to deploy this weapon on the duchy and use it as a threat at subsequent peace negotiations, demanding unconditional surrender from other countries or face atomic bombings. Sieghard couldn't understand why Berkman would reveal such crucial information. Berkman expressed that since the Emperor was planning to kill him, loyalty meant nothing. Moreover, once Izetta defeated Sophie, she would become the strongest witch in the world, capable of overturning the entire Germanic Empire alone. Berkman had no loyalty. He loved himself more than his country. Sieghard was annoyed, feeling he was nothing like Berkman. He then shared the intelligence with Fine. Fine was shocked that the enemy had developed such a terrifying weapon and felt guilty for involving witches in the war, escalating the conflict. Thus, she considered surrendering to prevent the Germanic Empire from bombing and to save Izetta from dying in the war. She blamed herself for succumbing to the temptation of the witch's power. Izetta stood up and slapped her, saying, "Your subjects are ready to die in battle. Why surrender first?" Izetta urged Fine to think of the people who trusted her, reminding her that the decision to use the witch's power was not hers alone. Izetta wanted to resolve the issue together with Fine, and hoped she would not give up the fight. Fine teared up and agreed to face the future with Izetta, regardless of the outcome. Later, Berkman explained a strategy to the group. Engage Sophie in battle before the enemy could launch their bomb. This would prevent the missile from being launched or exploding. Since Sophie, being a clone, had limited operational capacity with only 2 hours to fully utilize her magic powers, if Izetta could hold Sophie off for 2 hours, the duchy would not be hit by the missile. Meanwhile, the citizens had transported firearms to help, but Fine felt it was not enough to let Izetta fight alone. She needed to participate in the peace negotiations to ensure the major powers did not surrender first, which would render their victory meaningless. Therefore, Fine had to be present at the negotiations to secure the best outcome for Izetta. Berkman also agreed to help Fine prepare the documents. That evening, using magic, Izetta flew with Fine through the forest, reminding her of the first time she met Izetta as a child. Izetta wanted to apologize for her earlier actions. The two spent a sweet time flying through the sky, finally sitting on a mountain to talk. Fine was worried about how things would go, but Izetta said she had a plan. The next day, Fine and her subordinates went to the negotiation site, while Izetta prepared for battle at the rear and soon encountered Sophie at the front line. Sophie remarked that Izetta was as foolish as she had been in the past but intended to teach Izetta the truth, leading to immediate gunfire between them. Despite the barrage, Izetta, also possessing a magic stone, emerged unharmed from the first attack. Meanwhile, Berkman, on his way to the negotiation site, was recognized by Basler from earlier. Soldiers immediately pursued them, forcing Sieghard to drive away to escape. The four jumped from the car to avoid the Empire soldiers, and Berkman slipped away upon landing since they were now in a neutral country. At the negotiation, representatives from the Germanic Empire were sarcastically probing the United States of America's negotiators, urging them to consider declaring war. At the same time, Izetta engaged in a fierce battle with Sophie, both fighting like deities in the sky, unreachable by planes following them. Remembering that the missile needed Sophie to control it, Izetta quickly flew away with Sophie from the target area. Below, the female prison warden noticed something was amiss but was not worried, as the workshop had prepared a clone as a backup. Meanwhile, the Emperor of the Germanic Empire felt he had the world in his grasp. At the negotiation site, everyone watched a video of an atomic bomb explosion and learned of plans to bomb the duchy's capital. While Sieghard was still leading Fine to the negotiation site and using himself as bait to distract the soldiers, allowing Lotta to escort Fine. He was killed when he ran into someone at a corner who looked just like a new recruit from the Empire. Meanwhile, the fleeing Berkman encountered Basler, who was pursuing him. Basler accused Berkman of betraying Rickert, who had trusted him. Berkman argued that Rickert's excessive loyalty led to his death. Enraged, Basler considered Berkman deceitful and shot him. At the same time, Fine, escorted by Lotta, arrived at the negotiation site, where they were about to sign a contract. Fine intervened, announcing that Izetta was battling Sophie and had gained powers equal to hers, ensuring the duchy would not be destroyed. Some nations felt defeating the Germanic Empire was enough to claim victory. However, a representative from the United States of America raised a concern, suggesting that if Izetta defeated Sophie, Fine would be the sole ruler with a witch. He questioned what would happen if Fine harbored ambitions like the Emperor of the Germanic Empire. Fine did not respond to this. Elsewhere, the female warden at the workshop decided to forcibly awaken Sophie's clone, instructing it to ignite immediately upon awakening, which would result in its instant death. Meanwhile, Sophie used a train on the ground to attack Izetta. Izetta questioned why Sophie harbored such hatred towards the duchy. Sophie revealed that her betrayal was not by the queen, who, after capturing Sophie, had apologized, explaining it was the prince's command. The prince believed Sophie's love brought immense power, which could incite fear among people. He feared that after his death, the duchy would be seen as heretical, and the civilians would suffer. Thus, he planned to take Sophie with him in death. Sophie, deeply in love with the prince, had fought and killed many for him, only to feel betrayed at the end, fueling her hatred. She aimed to kill all of the prince's descendants and return to the kingdom she once protected. Izetta, however, had a different view. She believed that the prince, having become king, could not justify risking the country and its people for personal love, labeling him a tyrant if he did. The king likely also struggled with pain. From the start, Izetta was prepared to sacrifice everything for Fine, even accepting execution by fire if necessary. The battle between Izetta and Sophie was nearing its end, unbeknownst to the others that the warden had already awakened the clone and ordered it to launch the missile. At this moment, Fine also responded to the envoy from the United States of America. She stated that after this war, there would be no witches left. Izetta was prepared to deplete all the leyline energy sources in her battle with Sophie. Regardless of the outcome, both witches and magic would vanish from the world. The Count was worried about Izetta's future, and Fine had asked Izetta about this the previous night. Izetta acknowledged she might die, but she still wanted to pave the way for Fine. Her honesty was also her way of saying a proper goodbye to Fine. Fine mentioned that witches and magic would return to legend, taking the bomb with them. She then questioned if the allies were still willing to surrender. The situation at the site changed instantly. During the battle, Izetta extracted all the magical energy from the ley lines. The two powerful magics collided, and the missile, which required magical control, also vanished. Everyone saw a beam of white light shooting into the sky. Fine watched the beam fall and wept uncontrollably, knowing Izetta would not return. The Emperor found this very dull, remarking that in the end, battles are still fought with iron and blood. After that day, the war landscape was reshuffled. Led by the United States of America, the Allies gathered and launched extensive operations on the European continent. At the same time, the Volga Confederation, next to the Germanic Empire, also began attacking the Germanic Empire. The Germanic Empire was gradually driven to a desperate situation, and the Emperor committed suicide by swallowing a bullet. Stories of Fine and Izetta were sung on the streets, acknowledging that without them, the war could have expanded and lasted many more years. However, Fine believed that the war would continue, just at an unknown time. Berkman, with an injured eye and under a new name, started causing trouble again. Fine had promised Izetta to make their country better. Nobody knew that Izetta was not actually dead, but having lost her magic and paralyzed, she now lived in seclusion. Lotta took care of her, and Fine, after finishing her work, would visit Izetta in their countryside cottage. Izetta was still alive, and it was a relief.